I hope everybody is having an absolutely fabulous day. This talk is going to be on both the thyroid and parathyroid glands, but we are going to start off by talking about the thyroid gland. So the thyroid gland is a butterfly-shaped gland in the anterior neck on the trachea, just inferior to the larynx, that consists of an isthmus, which is a median mass connecting two lateral lobes. So I'm going to stop there for a second. And this is the first part is just describing the shape of the actual gland, which it does look like a butterfly. It does sit on the trachea. And then there's the isthmus between the two lateral lobes. And then next, we talk about some more stuff. Follicles. These are hollow sphere of epithelial follicular cells. Colloid, which is the fluid of the follicle lumen, and parafollicular cells, which produce a hormone called calcitonin. So back to that first part I talked about. So the butterfly-shaped gland on the trachea, here we are. It sits right here. Looks kind of like a butterfly, has the isthmus between the two lobes. And then we have these follicular cells that I was talking about a moment ago. And these follicular, this is a photomicrograph of thyroid gland follicles, by the way. Let's see, where was I? Okay, these are follicular cells, and these cells are going to secrete thyroid hormone. And then in the middle here, we have this colloid filled follicle. And then kind of between these follicles, we have these parafollicular cells. And these parafollicular cells are going to secrete calcitonin. And we're going to talk about both thyroid hormone and calcitonin. So thyroid hormone is the body's major metabolic hormone. It's found in two forms. T4, or thyroxine, is a major form that consists of two tyrosine molecules with four bound iodine atoms, and T3, which is triiodothyronine, and this form has two tyrosines with three bound iodine atoms. Both are iodine-containing amine hormones. Thyroid hormone affects virtually every cell in the body. Remember that thyroid hormone is a little bit different. We talked about in that very first talk that there's water-soluble and lipid-soluble hormones, right? And thyroid hormone, even though it is an amine, it still is a lipid-soluble hormone, which means that it's going to actually enter the target cell and bind to intracellular receptors that are within the cell's nucleus. This will trigger transcription of various metabolic genes, and these the resulting proteins are going to have a number of effects. And the effects of thyroid hormone include to increase basal metabolic rate and heat production, and this is referred to as the calorogenic effect. It will also regulate tissue growth and development. It's critical for normal skeletal and nervous system development and reproductive capabilities. And finally, it maintains blood pressure. So it increases adrenergic receptors in blood vessels. Synthesis. So the thyroid gland will store hormone extracellularly in follicle lumen until triggered by thyroid stimulating hormone to release. Remember, thyroid stimulating hormone is secreted by the anterior pituitary gland. T4 and T3 are transported by thyroxine binding globulins, or TBGs. Both bind to target receptors, but T3 is 10 times more active than T4. Peripheral tissues have enzymes needed to convert T4 to T3. The enzyme removes one iodine. Thyroid hormone release is regulated by negative feedback. So if the levels of thyroid hormone fall, that is going to stimulate the release of thyroid-stimulating hormone. Rising levels of thyroid hormone provide negative feedback inhibition on thyroid-stimulating hormone. Hopefully I said that right. Rising levels of thyroid hormone provide negative feedback inhibition on thyroid-stimulating hormone. If I just said the same thing twice, sorry, but I wanted to make sure I said it correctly. Thyroid-stimulating hormone can also be inhibited by growth hormone inhibiting hormone, dopamine, and increased levels of cortisol and iodide. Hypothalamic thyrotropin releasing hormone can overcome the negative feedback during pregnancy or exposure to cold, especially in infants. So basically what this is saying is there is a negative feedback loop here. So thyroid stimulating hormone is going to cause the release of thyroid hormone. However, once thyroid hormone levels go up, it's going to inhibit further thyroid stimulating hormone from being produced or released. And if thyroid stimulating hormone is not released, then that's not going to stimulate the release of thyroid hormone. So you see how it kind of shuts everything down. However, this hypothalamic thyrotropin releasing hormone can overcome that negative feedback. And that's what this is showing here. So the hypothalamus is producing the hormone, which is causing the anterior pituitary to release TSH, which is going to cause the thyroid gland to release thyroid hormones. However, once thyroid hormone levels go up, it's going to actually inhibit further release of thyroid stimulating hormone. You do not have to memorize this table. I know this is quite an extensive table. You do not have to memorize this table. In fact, I actually took an entire class on endocrinology as a graduate student. So you really can break this down into and get really, really detailed, but we're not going to get this detailed. Then there's also calcitonin that's produced by the thyroid gland. But remember, calcitonin is produced by the parafollicular or C cells, and this is going to be produced in response to high calcium levels. It's actually an antagonist to the parathyroid hormone. However, there is no known physiological role in humans at normal physiological levels, but at higher than normal doses, also would be known as like pharmacological doses, it will inhibit osteoclast activity, and that's going to prevent the release of calcium from bone matrix. It will also stimulate calcium uptake and incorporation into bone matrix. So really you can see here how it's an antagonist to parathyroid hormone. And I know we haven't talked about parathyroid hormone in this talk yet, but I don't know how much you learned about parathyroid hormone in AMP1, but parathyroid hormone, as we're going to talk about in a moment, stimulates osteoclasts, which are going to break down bone, which are going to release calcium. So calcitonin is inhibiting osteoclasts, which is preventing the release of calcium from bone. And again, calcitonin is produced by these parafollicular cells. And then we have the parathyroid gland. 4 to 8 tiny yellow-brown glands embedded in the posterior aspect of the thyroid. They contain oxyphil cells where there's no clear function known. And then the parathyroid cells, which are going to secrete parathyroid hormone. And parathyroid hormone is the most important hormone in calcium homeostasis, calcium ion homeostasis. So parathyroid hormone is going to be secreted in response to low blood calcium levels, and it's going to be inhibited by rising calcium levels. And the target organs are going to be definitely the skeleton, as well as the kidneys and the intestine. But we're about to see where they all come into play here in a moment. First, we're going to look at where they are. So this would be for example, the back of somebody's neck, right? And then down here in the back side of the thyroid, we find, in this case, 4 of these small parathyroid glands. All right, so what does parathyroid hormone do? It will stimulate osteoclasts to digest bone matrix. And once it digests this bone matrix, it's going to release calcium into the blood. It will also enhance the reabsorption of calcium by the kidneys and the secretion of phosphate by the kidneys. And it's going to promote the activation of vitamin D by the kidneys, which will in turn lead to an increased absorption of calcium by the intestinal mucosa. So that's just what this is showing, right? So in the event that like an individual had hypocalcemia, which would be low blood calcium levels, that would cause parathyroid hormone to be released. And then parathyroid hormone is going to increase osteoclast activity, which is going to put more calcium into the blood. It's going to cause more calcium to be reabsorbed in the kidney tubules. And then it's going to cause the activation of vitamin D by the kidney, which is going to in turn cause an increase in calcium absorption from food in the small intestine. All 3 of these things are going to work, where'd my cursor go? Here it is, to increase blood calcium levels. And then here are the questions for this third section for chapter 16. I'm going to leave it here for a moment. All right, I'm hoping at this point you've been able to pause it. So you guys have a good rest of your day.